Now I'm going to bring on our panelists for the next segment this evening, centering the voices of family members who've become activists after losing loved ones to violence. Please join me in welcoming Constance, the mother of Ramarley Graham, a Black teenager killed by NYPD in the Bronx in February of 2012. Constance is a member of Justice Committee. And also, we want to bring up Victoria Davis, the sister of Dalron Small, a Black man killed by NYPD officer after a road rage incident on July 4th of 2016. Victoria is also a member of Justice Committee. And Yulsan, who is joining us from Justice Committee, one of the New York City's leading social and racial justice organizations, who we greatly respect and work with on a number of important legislative and policy initiatives. So we're going to start with you, Constance. I want to make sure you're here. Hi, Constance. How are you?
I'm okay. How everybody doing?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Please share a little bit about your fight for justice for your son and how you've extended that fight for the children and loved ones of others as well. And then, just give us a little information about that. And also, you worked hard to push for the repeal of 50A, which kept officers' disciplinary records hidden from the public. Tell us about the repeal and where we are with that right now. But first, please share about your son and how you've actually extended that fight to fight for others.
Again, thank you for having me on. My name is Constance Malcolm. My son's name was Ramarley Graham. Ramarley was 18 years old and he was murdered February 2nd, 2012. A little background about what happened. Ramarley was walking home with two friends and he stopped in a bodega and he came right back out. He proceeded to walk up the block. The bodega is on 228th Street. We live on 229th Street. So he proceeded to walk to the block, and then there was two undercover officers on the opposite side of the street observing the bodega. Had nothing to do with Ramarley. So when Ramarley went into the bodega and came out too quickly, they deemed him suspicious. So when he continued to walk, he adjusted his pants because he has one of those belt where that have the little round hoop and then you put it through and then pull it back through. So oftentimes it get loose. So what he did, he pulled his pants up. That's when the two undercover cops say they saw a butt of a gun in his waist. These two undercover cops are Black men. They raided in and to other officers, telling them that Ramarley have a gun. Ramarley walked home. You see Ramarley calmly walking, opened up the door, came inside the house. Couple minutes later, you see the undercover cop rushing up to the door and trying to kick the door in. Unsuccessfully, he couldn't kick the door in from the front entrance. He went to the back entrance and knocked on the door, and there's a young kid, Javion, that lives on the first floor. There's a young kid that lives in the basement that normally comes to the first floor to get help with his homework. So when Eric Dixon, that lives on the first floor, heard the door banging, he told Javion to go look because he thought it was a kid from the basement coming up. So as Javion opened the door, the cop had the back door open. They told stuck the gun in Javion's face and told him to step out. And it was January 2nd. So in New York, that day was very cold. So Javion was even dressed like that to be outside. And then they proceed to run to the house. When they came in the house, Eric Dixon heard the noise. So he remembered that he had sent Javion to the back to see what was going on. So when Javion didn't come back, he proceeded to walk to the back. That's when they stuck the gun in his face. He put his hands up. They ran through his apartment, opened the front door, and let the other cops them in. The other cops them came in, ran up the door, kicked my door in, startled my mom because she heard the commotion, getting ready to walk to the door. That's when the door got kicked in. Ramarley was behind her. My son, Chinar Campbell, he was 6 at the time, was behind Ramarley. The gun went off, the shot fired. She thought it was her. She looked, she didn't see any blood. She remembered that Ramarley was behind her. She looked down, she see Ramarley laying on the floor, the bathroom floor, with his foot hanging out the door. Ramarley was dead. When she tried to ask what was going on, they manhandled her, they threatened her, they was gonna shoot her. She didn't shut up. And when she tried to call me, they snatched a phone from her, just basically manhandled her all the way. And Shinar tried to call me also. They took the phone away from him. On the video, you see them brought him outside. He had no clothes on because he had just came from school. He just had a t-shirt on, his underwear. They brought him outside with no clothes on. Well, I got the phone call when I was on my way from work, so I wasn't there. So when I got home, I saw a whole bunch of police, so I went and I told them who I was, gave them my ID and say, I live here, whatever, and it's a whole bunch of back and forth. So they told me that if I could go to the precinct. I said, fine. I went to the precinct. At this time, nobody told me my son was killed, shot, anything. I found out when they took me to the precinct, when they brought my mom in, and she blurted out to me, because they call me Little Miss. She said, Little Miss, they killed Marley. And I'm like, she don't know what the hell she's talking about, because she was crying. So then my phone rang, and it was Frank with Ramarley's dad, because I had called him when I got the phone call and I was on my way home. He asked me where I was. I told him I was in the precinct. I started telling him what was going on. He asked where my mom. I said, she's right here. They want to talk to her. He's like, no. They can't talk to her because she doesn't have a lawyer. Or they didn't listen to me. They hush her in the back. And basically, I couldn't see her. So I pushed my way back there. I didn't know where they had it. It was like 3 doors. So I started banging on all the doors. One door finally opened. It was 2 officers in there. One came out, the one that assaulted me and the one that had my mom basically hostage in the room. When I couldn't get anywhere with them, I left because I had to find out where my other son was, the 6-year-old son. I left. They held my mom for 7 hours, questioning her, tried to put words in her mouth. She kept on saying her grandson didn't run. They kept on telling her he was out of breath coming in the house. And she's like, no, he wasn't out of breath. He came in normally, and it was a whole bunch of back and forth. They had her in the precinct. So finally, my lawyer showed up, and the same nonsense shenanigan going on. We don't know who you're talking about. We don't have her here. It was a whole bunch of runaround that day. Long story short, the officer was charged with manslaughter 1 and manslaughter 2. Then the case got thrown out on a technicality. We all know that don't happen to us, but it happened to cops. They get thrown on a technicality. They told us we could go back to the grand jury or appeal. I chose to go back to the grand jury because I felt I had a strong enough case because we got the first indictment. The second grand jury didn't vote no true bill. So I proceeded with department trial, and that was another headache. I had to fight like hell to get those charges. And they finally found him guilty on the department charges, and he was supposed to get fired. They called him first. They told him he was going to get fired. So he went on his day off on a Sunday and went and resigned. So technically, he was not even fired. He resigned. So with all that said, he got off the force, and the sergeant that was there that was supposed to monitor the whole operation, they forced him to retire early. I believe it's 1 year early. And the other officer, the partner, got 1 year probation. I'm going to go into a little bit about 58 because this is a segment where I feel is very important. These officers, I didn't know who they are. It was Richard Hayes had 60 CRB complaint, 10 allegation within, I think, a 13-month span. So this show you if we had 58 back then, we would have knew this man was a threat. He was basically a renegade person that shouldn't have never been on the force. And he murdered my son. That would have never happened if we had 58 because he probably would have been disciplined and we would have known these charges with a follow-up of what's going on with him. But because we didn't have 58, we didn't know this officer name. And it was 3 years after Ramarley death that we got a leak about his record. So this is to show you, we as family has to rely on leaks to get information about police. This is why it's so critical that we have 58. Because this would tell us who these officers are, if there was ever discipline, what was the disciplinary action, if they were suspended, anything like that, we would have known. So 58 is very important that we have right now. We got 58 passed as a bill, a legislation that passed June 1st. We got 3 bills passed June 1st. That was like amazing because if it wasn't for people up in the street after George Floyd, we probably would have never had it because we've been going to Albany fighting, like crazy with Cuomo to get this bill passed. And every step of the way, Cuomo tried to block it. So when Cuomo tried to pretend like he did us a favor, he didn't do us no favor because he tried to block this bill for years. But because we were so, help bend, like we have to get this bill passed because it affects us as Black and brown people. Because you know, we hear police kill us every day. None of them get charged. And if they do get charged, like again, it gets thrown out, and they back in the street. We don't know nothing about them, where they are located, you know, all of these things we don't know. So when we got this victory, we felt, yes, we finally got something, but now we have to go back to court because the union is trying to fight us on 58. The union, they're very powerful, but we as Black and brown people on the ground, we could get this done again. We could beat them because we got it before. A lot of people didn't think we were going to get it done, and we got it done. So, you know, with this union fighting about they don't want 50A, why you don't want 50A? If you have a person that molests a child, you put their record out, we know where they live, and all of this. Don't forget, we are not asking for the police address. That's not what we asking for, because de Blasio tried to make it look like that's what we was doing. Don't get it twisted. We're not looking for the address. We want to know their record on the job. What was their discipline? If they was disciplined when they do something, or, you know, did they lose vacation time? Because we all know that's what happened. They put them on desk duty. They lose probably like a day's pay, and they go about their merry way and go back in the community. We need to know who are in our community. We need to know who are policing us. We don't really need all these police. You hear de Blasio talk about he cut funded $1 billion. We know that's crap. None of that happened. They want us to believe it, and they want us to think because we defund the police by $1 billion, we have all this shooting. No, that's not what happened. We need school for our young kids. You see this summer, this is why we have this uptick in shooting, because our young kids has nowhere to go. They cutting the school funding. We don't have youth program and all these stuff. If we have these programs for our kids, we probably want to have some of these, you know, kids in the street running around, you know, doing God knows what they're not supposed to do. So we want to let people know that, you know, and we have also got the special prosecutor, where we take away the power from the DA and give it to the Attorney General when it comes to police shooting. Because again, we all know the police and the DA, they work hand in hand every day. So they're not going to want to send one of their people to jail. So we took away that power from them. So no, any shooter or questionable shooting, it goes to the Attorney General, or anybody dies in custody while being arrested, it goes to the Attorney General. So that's very important also for us as mothers or families that's fighting for justice. Because, you know, my case is done. There's nothing I could do again. But I'm making sure my Black and brown boys and girls that are adopted, because these are my kids now, we want to make sure their family don't go through the same thing that I went to. I have to file FOIA requests and, you know, all these papers just to get documents that should have been given to me. I shouldn't have to fight for that. And when we got these documents, they're very heavily doctored. So that's to show you they don't want to give us this information.
That's right.
A lot of people might not know what FOIA information is. It's like when the police do their report, what they write in their report. So you get all those documents. So that's very important, because this is what shows all the lies that they put out, and then the statement that they written down don't even come, you know, it doesn't match. So we, you know, with those things are very important. And also the Police Data Stat Act, that's very important too, because a lot of time when they stop, you know, it shows that it's mostly Black and brown people are being stopped. And where they've been stopped, that means like what neighborhood they are, you know, they are targeting. And we know oftentimes it's Black and brown neighborhood. So that's also very good that we have that. Like I said, the 3-4 victory it's a huge victory for us in New York, because 3 at one time, you rarely probably even seen that. And we did it when they said we couldn't do it, because years ago we had family that fight for the special prosecutor, like the Anthony Baez case and Amadou Diallo case. They fought for the special prosecutor years ago, and it didn't happen because of 9/11. And a lot of people were like, oh, you're not going to get it. You know, y'all will never get it, but we did. So we as Black and brown people, we very powerful. We could get things done. We just got to put our minds together and work together. Forget about this bickering, who's this organization. We all fighting for the same cause. We need to get on one accord and get these stuff done, because we are the ones that are dying every day, and we are not getting any justice. We can't have, we need to have transparency when it comes to police, and we don't have that, so we will never have justice. But if we continue to fight, we could make changes, because we're seeing it right now, and we're in a movement now. This is the time to get what we want done.
Thank you so much, Constance. You You are so inspirational. I just want to thank you for all your advocacy and for everything that you have contributed to the movement. And, you know, thank you again for also sharing the story of Ramarley. I know that's challenging. And so now we're going to pass it on to Victoria again. Victoria is the sister of Delron Small, a Black man that was killed by New York PD officer after a road rage incident on July 4th of 2016. So Victoria, like others here tonight, you've taken the tragedy of your brother's experience and used it to evolve into an activist and an organizer. What's that been like for you?
It's been many ups and downs. It's been a lot, but anything easy is not worth fighting for. And I see it as anything that's very hard, because it's very hard. It must be worth fighting for. Just as a whole, as a people, liberation and just community is worth fighting for. So actually, I have a few things beyond Delron, because I do more than advocacy for Delron. I stand for the people. And so actually, I had a couple of things I wanted to highlight. First, I want to demand the firing of Wayne Isaacs. Wayne Isaacs killed Delron. Wayne Isaacs could have drove off. He could have did a lot of things, but he didn't. He was not in imminent danger when he killed Delron. That's like a misconception. He was not in imminent danger. He chose to stop before Delron. Actually, where Delron pulled over, it was my cousin's barbershop. So Wayne Isaacs had ample opportunity to make other decisions. He did not. All Delron did was exit the vehicle and was shot 3 times in front of his 4-month-old son. And so I wanted to speak to people about the difference between community violence and state violence. Oftentimes when people in the community have a transgression, everyone wants them to go to jail, everyone wants them punished. But when a police officer or corrections officer has a transgression, people are reluctant. They're reluctant because they're afraid, they're scared, or how people think of authority, right? Because they don't understand that we have the authority, we have agency, and we have rights, and we have rights to hold these people accountable. And so we have to be very careful when we have conversations regarding community violence and state violence. Lately, I hear a lot of that because of the media. So we have to be careful and fact check the things that we're watching on the media, because the media has their own stuff that they have going on, but we have to make sure that we take care of us. I also wanted to speak about the dangers of gentrification, only because I saw the president's tweets earlier that were like pretty disgusting, right? So, like low income housing, and that's a part of state violence. And so people think that these things are separate, and state violence, police killings, police brutality, those things intersect. They're not separate entities, because when we have people who are being displaced from their homes and they can't build communities, they don't know the neighbors, they don't know who lives in their building, they can't vouch for the little kids who are coming home from school, then that is a form of state violence when people are being displaced from their homes. And then we see in cases of like Saeed Vassal, where those were not members of the community who called the police on him. The members of the community were comfortable with him. He was well loved. But the people who were not from that community, because that community did experience a lot of gentrification, and it resulted in his death, right? And so we have to care about state violence as a whole. And so that's the type of work that I do. And that's my mission, to teach people about state violence and building community as a whole. Voting, and voting with integrity, with education, voting and knowing who you're supporting. Don't just get in the ballot and check off, oh, they're Black, they're brown, vote after you look into the person's background, look and see what they have done. See if it's a person that you can hold accountable. I know that right now our presidential election is very limited, and so but we shouldn't think of it as the lesser of the evils or the evil that we don't know. I've been looking into it a lot, and I think we should look into it and see it as who can we hold accountable, knowing your elected officials. When I started off our organizing and doing activism with JC, that's what I learned, like how to know the politicians. And I think that that's a very, very important key to know what these politicians stand for, so that when we're in these booths, we're choosing with knowledge. I believe the last thing that I wanted to speak about is when we're organizing, when we're protesting and we're rallying, we don't have to choose one thing, right? We can walk and chew bubble gum. So we can be out in the streets, but we also can learn policy work, as Constance was stating earlier. Like she has a vast knowledge of policy work. And I think that sometimes people feel like you have to choose one or the other, but we can do all of it. We are people who are very resourceful. We can learn a lot of things. And I think that the climate that we're in right now, with all of these police killings, like we thought that after we watched the video of George Floyd's neck being kneed on, right, that it would stop. These people didn't stop. They just continued because it's becoming more brazen. And so we have to make sure that we're holding all of these systems accountable and not seeing them as just one entity, because they all intersect. And I'm always free to give more information. I won't hold you guys for too long, but thanks for having me. Thanks for just creating this platform. I think that it's much needed. And yeah.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Victoria. I know that you are part of, Justice Committee. You're also, part of all these other entities, and you always show up. I'm so grateful for you and Baby Justice, and you show up with your family, you show up with passion, and that's really about, what Constance was saying. It's not really about the organization, the entity of the organization, but it's really about the people, right? And you constantly remind us that relationships are important to you. And I think it's a perfect segue into just the different tactics within the larger strategy, right? We know Justice Committee works directly with the families. We know that they're also advocating for policy. They do press conferences. They have, the ability to really engage community in a very unique way. And so, Yulsan, you've expressed the importance of Justice Committee's approach to centering the leadership of people who've been directly impacted by police violence, but you also connect this policy piece together for impactful advocacy, making sure that those that are directly impacted by the issue are also advocating and that are also on the front lines. And so please tell us, what are your policy goals beyond Repeal 50 that Constance mentioned earlier?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. And I want to keep my comments super short because I feel like there's so many important voices in this segment, and really we need to hear from the families. We've got a lot more work to do. We've had these incredible victories in New York, but we are full on, head on into a campaign to defund the NYPD. And I think that's going to be addressed in a later segment. I do also want to lift up just about these victories, these state level victories that Constance was talking about and that Victoria mentioned, that it was the protest movement in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade and others that really created the context for us to push these through. But they would not have happened without years of organizing of organizations across the State Justice League and other organizations. These campaigns were coordinated by Communities United for Police Reform, our coalition, but they absolutely would not have happened without the leadership of the families, the New York families that are on right now. And I don't just mean that they are the media spokespeople or the face of the campaign. For the Justice Committee, actually, it was the families that told us that these were the legislative priorities. Like, they're the ones that are setting our agenda. And it's the families actually that were on the phone at midnight and past as we were negotiating these bills in the final stretch. And so what I want to say, like the message that I have and the Justice Committee has for any elected officials who may be watching right now, and certainly any elected officials who felt some pressure in the past period, is it is absolutely correct for you to be afraid of the movement with the leadership of the families, and that the families are unified, the families know what changes are needed, and we are in lockstep with them and standing behind them. And I want to say also to all of the activists and organizers and new folks that are watching, that really it is really important to listen to Constance's voice, Victoria's voice, all of the other families, and not just about hearing the stories and you know, feeling the pain, but really listen to what they're saying about how we get this work done. And I think, you know, I feel very honored and humbled to be in the Justice Committee and be able to be following their leadership and supporting, uplifting their leadership. And thank you also to Justice League for creating the space for these conversations.
Thank you so much, Yulsan, for also, you know, being a model to so many of us, and to always showing up and including us in these conversations. I'm going to bring on Elisa Finley, the sister of both Ja, who was killed in September of 2018 by a Dallas police officer who claimed she entered his apartment by accident. Elisa is a co-founder of Sisters of the Movement. Elisa, your brother's case received national attention and you've become an activist because of it. Can you share what you're currently working on, as well as why you feel it's important to also ensure that sisters are included in the conversation? I think you're on mute, Elisa.
So sorry. Currently, we're working on having the street both lived on, which is Lamar Street, renamed to the Botham Jean Boulevard. It is, for me, it is very important to have that street renamed because not only it's the location of Southside Flats, but it's also the location of the Dallas Police Department. For me, maybe in a selfish way, I would love for every police officer walking into that building to forever say his name. And what better way to have that done than to have his name on their checks, their letterheads, and every correspondence that comes out of that building. So I'm working hard on that, and I really want to see it happen. Ideally, I would want it to be unveiled on his birthday this year, because I like to remember his birthday and not the day he was killed, even though it's the same September. I will still celebrate his birthday, and that would be, to me, the best birthday gift for him. The second part of your question, I'm sorry, what was it again?
Just the importance of, you know, as we've learned about Mothers of the Movement, you know, and I've had conversations with Victoria, you know, we've talked a lot about why it's also important for sisters to be involved in advocating for the loss of a sibling. Why do you feel that's important?
I think it's important for sisters, for brothers, for siblings in general, because your sibling is your first best friend. Botham and I, we were close. I spoke to him up until his last day on earth, up until he entered his apartment, and that's something we did. We spoke every single day. A lot of times when someone is killed by police officers, the highlight is focused on the parents. But we share that pain. We lose a sibling and we lose a best friend at the same time. So I think it's important to highlight the sisters and the brothers because we feel it. We're in that fight. We want to do something. For me, I don't feel like I could mourn my brother completely until I see something that shows me that, you know, his death was not in vain. So that is my fight right now, to make his death have a purpose. And until I can see that, then the fight is not over.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Elisa. Thank you. We're gonna go ahead and welcome the last two of this segment. And please welcome Ashley and Michelle Monterosa, the sisters of Sean Monterosa, a 22-year-old Latino young man killed by police just last month in Vallejo, California. The loss you both have experienced is so recent, but you've also been both galvanized into action. I felt that, you know, the last two times that I've spoken to you both, and to get justice for your brother and expose the culture of police violence in Vallejo seems to be really important. Tell us a little bit more about that and what motivates you both to keep going. And I know that this is, you know, I have to say, this is a really heartfelt conversation. I'm feeling it just hearing everybody. But again, you know, like I had reached out to you, Michelle, and, you know, I just want to again thank you for responding, because it's not that easy. And to share your brother's story is so important, I know, to not only you, but to so many of us that do this work as well.
Yeah. Well, we just want to say thank you to you guys for allowing us to even speak. And right now, Alyssa's words just hit me, because it's, you know, it's a wound that's so fresh, but instead of, you know, we all mourn, but we're more on the way that I feel like it's going to help us heal, is to turn our pain into power. And what right now just resonated really close to me, it's like, you know, we want our brothers to have a purpose. We don't want these pigs to just be like, well, that's another band on my badge. So on Vallejo PD, we just found out yesterday that they had this weird tradition within the force when they murder. They have been murdering men in Vallejo. There's been 37 men.
Since 1997.
And all those officers, they have a slight bend on their badge, and it's a weird cult ritual.
To initiate how many bodies they've all had.
And they caught on a body. Jared Ton, who murdered Sean on June 2nd, must have his first bend. But there are other officers in there who have caught other bodies. You know, they've murdered 4 or 5 plus more men, and they're still on the force. And just to give you guys a little background about our family and Sean, is we're from San Francisco. Sean was out one night in Vallejo and was murdered in Vallejo. Prior to him passing that evening, that night, he sent me and Ashley a text message at 11:49 saying, "Can you guys help me by signing the petition for George Floyd to get justice? Only takes a minute, you know, we all know Sean." So I responded, just did it, and Ashley sent him a heart.
And then just 40 minutes after, he was murdered.
And we got a phone call around 1:09 of someone hysterically crying and saying your brother was just murdered. You know, we've gotten phone calls and just scares in the past, not with murder, but just of, you know, what do you do when your brother is constantly being harassed by police? You know, either always booked in or something like that. So me and Ashley thought that's what it meant, but something just felt so different. I believe that all our loved ones, we have a spiritual connection, our lifeline. And I can't explain the feeling I had. I felt very nauseated. It takes about 40 minutes to get to Vallejo from San Francisco. So this is when we had a state issued, or San Francisco issued a curfew at 8 p.m. So we weren't allowed, you know, technically allowed to leave. But, you know, that's my brother. I'm gonna go figure out what happened. So me and Ashley both got in the vehicle. We drove to Vallejo. By the time we get to Vallejo, it's already like 2 a.m. Sean's phone was still pinpointed at the location, which was 1050 Redwood Street.
So we have a group chat in which Sean's last text message was for the petition of George Floyd, and we also shared our locations with each other because we were that close. And so when we got to the crime scene, we were like, our brother's location is here. Where is he? We're trying to locate him. And they said, well, there's a lot of people that got arrested or this and that. I said, well, his phone's here. Where is he? They said, well, there's a lot of phones here. After we got the footage that was released, my brother was alone. So
therefore, they already lied. Me and Ashley didn't leave Vallejo that night till like 5 a.m. It was basically a wild goose chase. They sent us to the Vallejo PD. The Vallejo PD was closed. They all knew it was an officer involved shooting, so they're out on the streets. The hospital was on lockdown. We went to the hospital, tried to identify Sean. They said, no, that's not him. We have a guy that's bigger build. So me and Ashley
They were just sending us back and forth to find time from the crime scene to the hospital and another hospital. We were on a wild goose hunt, and they knew what had happened at that point. That eventually we found out that there was already an officer there.
Apparently he was, getting checked in for his wounds or whatever happened.
And Sean already was surrendering on his knees with his hands up when an unmarked pickup truck arrived to the scene. The unmarked pickup truck hadn't even stopped when Officer Jarrett Ton, from the backseat of the pickup truck, lifted his AR-15 and shot through the windshield 5 times. One bullet struck my brother in the neck and out the head. Eventually we saw the footage that they started giving my brother CPR.
We all know that, anyone, you don't have to be a doctor to understand, if there's ever a wound, you apply pressure to that. So it just goes to show they're untrained.
They're incompetent. And once my brother was already lifeless and bleeding out, they cuffed him. My brother was already dead and they cuffed him.
Like, how afraid do you feel of a Black man or a Latino man to still cuff him while they're lifeless already? So
they kept my brother in handcuffs until the paramedics arrived.
Even the paramedics, you hear them in the video say, you need to take those off. Like, I can't take a pulse. But that whole night when we were out there, I told Ashley, let's just go home and regroup. We weren't notified by Vallejo PD till 38 hours later, and they never reached out. Our attorney, John Burrs, was the one who went to the police
press conference
on June 3rd.
And June 3rd was the day after my brother was murdered. I turned 20.
So, that's already hurtful enough to lose your brother, and then for her to turn 20 on that evening. So they called us, a detective, Kevin Rose, and said, can I speak to the Monterosa family? And I said, what is this regards? He's like, I just need to ask some questions. I hung up. I called John and I said, well, there's this guy trying to contact us. He's like, well, you don't need to talk to them. The only reason we knew Sean was gone is because we called the coroner's office. And when Ashley gave a description and she said, you know what, can you actually give me his birthday? And my sister gave him his birthday and they were like, yep, he's here. So that's how we found out. No one's ever reached out from Vallejo. What we have had so far is that the pressure we've applied. We had Krishna Abrams, the DA
Solano County
to recuse herself.
We went to go protest at the Solano County DA's office for her to recuse, and 2 weeks after we protested, she finally did recuse. So now it's supposed to be Attorney General Javier Becerra to take the case. However, he's more like a puppet at this point.
They're all playing hot potato with Sean's case.
The windshield of the unmarked pickup truck in which Jarrett Ton shot at my brother through with an AR-15, that evidence has now been destroyed and tampered with. The 2 officers that tampered and destroyed the evidence are Michael Nicolini and Fabio Rodriguez. Michael Nicolini is the president of the Vallejo Police Union. So that just goes to show, we all know how powerful these police unions are and how much wiggle room they have to get away with these things, that AG Becerra is now investigating just the tampering with evidence, but it's unfair that the destruction of evidence is more important than my brother's being murdered by the hands of a police officer.
They gave the statement of saying that Sean was on his knees when his hands up. So that's already a universal sign of surrender. Sean knew that whatever he was doing, he was going to get booked in, as he must have thought. But then here comes this unmarked vehicle still driving and shoots out. It didn't even make a complete stop. It still drove towards him. What we do have as family demands now is that we found out that Jarrett Ton, which is the officer who murdered my brother, is back off paid leave, and he's at a desk job right now at Vallejo. We want him fired, prosecuted, and convicted. That is straight up cold blood murder. But also,
this is an officer who's had 3 previous
incidents
and complaints where he has shot at 3 Latino men before. Sean's the first murder, but this is an ongoing issue that he's been doing. And this was in Galt near Sacramento. So once they found out about those 3 shootings with those folks,
Here,
they sent him
transfer them.
they transferred over to Vallejo. And this is what happens all the time. When someone does a bunch of dirt in one city, they just send them over to the next quiet city. And Vallejo's been getting away with all these murders since 1997 because Vallejo is so small. But it had to be my brother, from being from San Francisco, being murdered out there just that night, to shed so much light on the other families' cases. And it's just, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just, it's insane to me that no one's even knew how dangerous and how corrupt Vallejo is.
Vallejo's the highest per capita in California. You're more likely to, a third of the population is more likely to be murdered by Vallejo PD than regular just street violence, violence itself. So our family's demands are to fire and prosecute and convict Jared Ton, but also Michael Nicolini. He is an 18-year veteran, and he should know better. That's obstruction of justice at the end of the day. They would never allow tampering with evidence for any other case. Why was it such a rush to take my brother's vehicle that was a key murder evidence, So it's more infuriating to us that they have that power to tamper. And it just goes to show that we need state legislators to implement a third party to investigate officers when there is officer-involved shootings. But then again, the big reform is we want to defund, right? Once we defund, we need to disarm, because at the end of the day, they're more cowardly to murder our brothers and sisters, and we're sick of it. And that me and Ashley will do anything we can to make sure Sean is the last one in Vallejo, but also in California. Gavin Newsom has yet to speak out on the 3 Latino men who have been murdered on the hands of police. My brother is Sean Monterrosa, but also Eric Salgado in Oakland and Andres Guardado in Gardena, California. So there's a lot of silence. And aside from all of this, my brother was for Black liberation. He went out for the protesters for George Floyd. We already know that a younger generation of us were people thought Rodney King era would be the end. But here we are, 2020, George Floyd, and it's just sickening to us. And this is the time that it's Black and brown unity, because we need to fight a bigger gang, and it's the police. Because at the end of the day, they're more afraid of us being united and going against them than, they feel outnumbered. And I feel like we need to apply all the pressure we have right now and not stop, and continue it till we get these actions implemented, we get these cops convicted and fired. But then again, if they ever do have any officer involved, problems, they shouldn't even be a cop in the first place. Right. So that's where we're at. We're hurt, but we're also feel empowered to spread awareness and make sure that my brother's name doesn't go in vain, just like Alyssa said. And, the families were hurt. We're hurting. There's generations who've been hurting for years, and we got to do everything we can to make sure these cops are incarcerated, because that's really where they belong.
I want to just thank you both again. I don't think I've ever moderated a panel and had tears in my eyes. I think this is a first for, I also saw tears in the other panelists' eyes, but we are touched and moved by your story. Always know that those of us that are on this panel here are here to support you. You have an extended family within us. And we're also gonna fight for your brother. There's the Instagram page at Justice for Sean. Yeah. And so people could follow that, as well as, we're going to be showing up with you here in California to make sure that we get justice for not only him, but like you said, Eric and Andres and any other person who has been killed at the hands of police. And I really want to applaud you for reminding us that at this moment, we need Black and brown unity. We need to be in solidarity with one another to fight the largest thing, which is police. And so thank you both. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for pouring your hearts out, for sharing your strategies and everything that you all done. I'm going to try to bring Tamika back. I know that